Hi, my name is Winsley, and welcome to my video going over my 10 general tips for playing on the new content that we're getting in the Ways of War expansion and the free update for Age of Wonders 4, both of which are coming out on November 5th. Big thank you to Paradox Interactive and Triumph Studios for sending me a free press key for Age of Wonders 4, Ways of War, and for including me in the early coverage of this expansion. I've been working a lot on this video, and I'm very excited to share my insights with you all. So without further ado, we're going to jump into my first tip, which is you can reduce the time it takes to pillage a city province to 0 turns from 2 turns using the new Strife subculture and the sixth chaos perk from the Empire skill tree. I can't show off the sixth chaos perk very easily from this menu, so what I want to do first here is just show off what you get for Strife. Now, this pop-up says a lot about the Strife subculture, but what I really want to focus on is that second bullet point, which says raising cities and pillaging province takes -1 turn. And while it is good to be able to raise cities faster if you're playing this subculture, if you're being aggressive with not just the free cities, but the other rulers, the fact that you can pillage provinces faster is very unique and will allow you to pillage provinces more efficiently from the very beginning of the game. But like I mentioned earlier, once you combine it with the sixth chaos perk, then all of a sudden it takes you 0 turns to pillage provinces, which no other subculture, no other culture in the game currently has access to this type of interaction. So they are just very unique in that sense. If we just take a quick look at the Reaver faction, you might expect the Reavers to have something that allows them to do something similar. They have this total war mechanic, which means that they don't get penalties for declaring war on people without justification. They have this war spoil interaction, but they do not get to pillage cities faster and they do not get to raise them faster like the Oathsworn subculture. Now, I think we're ready to look a little bit more at that sixth chaos perk. So if we look at this save file on turn 26, I am just now getting to the point where I can go up here to the Empire Development and pick the Skilled Raiders Chaos Empire skill. I guess you could consider it like the fifth Chaos Empire skill or the sixth, depending on if you count this before that. But let's read this. This says that you're going to be able to pillage a province in 1 less turn. You'll get 20% more rewards, and the pillaging units are healed 20 HP. And once I take that, that will make it so that I can actually pillage this in 0 turns. If we look here, most other factions will take 2 turns in order to pillage, or if they have the skilled things, then it can be reduced down to 1 turn. But I can actually make it so that it takes me 0 turns, so that I can just do this immediately, which is going to be very, very nice in multiplayer where people are playing simultaneous and people might be able to catch your guy, but you just summon him in, move him over quickly, and you get the pillage done before they can respond because it literally takes you 0 turns. I don't think they should be able to just move to block off all of the provinces without actually just leaving a unit there. So that's click this button and let's see that this will actually take 0 turns. I get 90 gold, 6 Imperium, but the really neat thing here is you can see my guy still has 28 movement, but I think for balance purposes, they made it so that this guy runs out of movement when you use that pillaging mechanic. But I still think it's very good and worth doing because you get that reward immediately, and that can pay off quite quickly, especially if you're using summons and you're using mana channelers to make them cost only 30 mana and a couple casting points. I think it's like 60 casting points to get the tier 1 guys on the map. And then as you saw, you get 30 gold. That alone right there, just burning down 1 province, can make summoning in a unit worthwhile. My next tip is to try playing as a good alignment build using the Righteous Oathsworn. I know a lot of players who refuse to use good alignment or to go for good alignment because it's just so efficient to do some of the evil things in Age of Wonders 4, attacking free cities, burning down their provinces. Those things give negative alignment and are generally considered more efficient. I think in theory they're supposed to be more efficient in the short term, but the way Age of Wonders works is if you can get more resources early, that allows you to expand and kind of snowball that kind of power into the late game. And this is why I really like the way the Righteous Oathsworn's nobility modifier works. Basically, every time you take good alignment, you're going to be building towards better and better levels of nobility. If you can get to just 20 alignment at the beginning of the game, which this faction does, then you're going to be able to get the adherent level, which will be +3 spirit damage on all of your repeating attacks, and I think that would be double to +6 spirit damage on non-repeating attacks. So this adds up very quickly and is easier to apply than the Oathsworn Strife, which requires you to be outnumbered. It basically requires you to be facing more enemy units than you have on the field, and then the Harmony one, it heals you a little bit when you reduce below 60%. So generally speaking, once you have the devotion built up on the Oathsworn righteousness, you'll get more benefit out of it more easily, and it's very good because spirit damage is just incredibly efficient damage channel. Very few things have spirit resistance or extra spirit resistance on top of their basic resistance. Now, let's discuss a couple quick and easy ways to boost up your alignment. If you wanted to, you can take two traits that give you +10 alignment at the very beginning of the game. And I have to say, I'm a really big fan of Devotees of Good on this faction because it gives you extra gold and Imperium in your cities when you have extra levels of good alignment. And the way these levels work are a little bit different than the way devotion works. You're going to be considered good at 10 to 40 alignment, very good at 40 to 100, and pure good at 100 to 130. Whereas the devotions thresholds happen at 20 instead of I think 10 being where it starts to be something different, and then 70 is where it starts to be devotee, and then 120 to 130 would be where you're at the paragon level. So the fact that you can get the extra gold and Imperium from the alignment here, and you get the devotion from that alignment. Just it synergizes really, really well. And on top of that, the Keepers of Knowledge wasn't bad either because that allows me to get extra knowledge out of the free cities that I'm not going to be attacking. If you're going for good alignment, you're not attacking free cities that aren't already at war with you. If they decide to declare war on you, you can take out the city, but it's something that you can't rely on. So I think this meshes really well with the idea behind this build. Another thing you can do is you can create a map that has the Umbral Abyss on it. This one is got the Umbral Abyss, so when I went exploring down here, I ran into this faction, which gave me a choice to get 20 free positive alignments to go to war with them. So if we go down here, it doesn't tell us which event that was, but I think it is the recent event +20 down here. We're up to +60 and we're very close to getting to the devotee level. I think the next thing we're going to show off here will allow me to get to there by just attacking some independents with some scary stacks. So if I auto into you, they're dead. And if I auto into this, I think they should try to run. Yeah, there we go. We can let them go, and that will give us 10 alignment, which takes us up to devotee. And I would recommend you allow that to give you the good alignment when you have the chance. A lot of people like taking the fights so that you can get more experience on your leaders, so that you can level them up faster. But I think if you're playing as this faction or this build type, you want to take the alignment whenever possible. My next tip is to try and take society traits that match your ruler's ambition. This dragon ruler is a collector, which means they want a full set of tier 2 items equipped, and the minor ambition that they have is to just have a item equipped for 5 turns, and they'll get 2 renown for each of those items that are equipped. This ruler I gave the Ruthless Raiders Society trait and the Artifact Hoarders, because that would allow them to get more items at the very beginning of the game. This will give you 2 random hero items. Sure, they may be tier 1 and they may match some of the other hero items that you get from the other choice, but I think that this should make it generally easier for you to get more tier 2 items faster, because you also get tier 2 and tier 3 hero items for clearing ancient wonders and infestation. So all you have to do is scout those out and go for them relatively early to try and complete this ambition pretty quickly. And then Ruthless Raiders, as I mentioned earlier, this will give you 2 random hero items. It doesn't give you more items later, but it does give you more to play around with at the very beginning. The other 2, what do you call them, ambitions that I really like are the Privateer and the Prospector, I think is the other one. There's Collector, Privateer, and Prospector were the ones that I was playing around with the most. And I found that the Collector was actually one of the ones that was harder to accomplish. I did make him a Dragon Ruler so that he had less item slots to fill. Dragon Rulers had the least amount, I want to say 5 item slots, because they can't put on like a chest plate of armor or a helmet. They can put on claws and miscellaneous items and a ring, but that is less than everyone else, so I figured that that would make it so I could accomplish this relatively quickly. I found out in the end actually that without any society traits helping me get to this goal, that I was able to do this one the quickest, and I really like the bonus you get for having a city with more than 200 gold income. This will make it so that the units that the ruler is leading will just be generally better. They'll cost a little bit more gold upkeep, but that isn't that hard to mitigate. If it's a really big problem, you just have your ruler not stand with all of your units at the end of the turn, and that will help you get around the extra gold upkeep. But I also found that just generally clearing nodes is pretty easy, so I was able to really level up my ruler's ability to govern using this ambition. And then there was also Prospector here, or not Prospector, Privateer, which I think you can take society traits to make it so that you can accomplish this goal probably faster than Prospector, but it really does depend on the map that generates around you. If you don't have a lot of water, then there isn't any point in taking Privateer. If you've got just a land map, you might be able to find some water underground, but it generally isn't gonna be something that would be worth taking Privateer for. And then the other things that I took here was Experienced Seafarer, because, well, that just lets you get into the water a little bit quicker. And then Powerful Evokers wasn't bad because I wanted to get another support unit. I found that I really liked getting an extra support unit from the Devotees of Good. I forgot to mention that earlier, but the support unit really helps with clearing because the Oathsworn have a very nice AoE heal, which can allow your guys to just keep clearing very efficiently. Now, let's actually take a second to look at these rulers a few turns into each of the maps. This is turn 14, and I'm just now getting to the point where I can fully equip with tier 2 items. I've been trying to clear out the stuff around me for items, but I haven't had much luck, so I actually had to build an item forge, and you could take the thing that lets you have an item forge on turn 1 to accomplish this goal a little bit faster, but generally speaking, I don't like that choice because I feel like there's society traits that I enjoy playing around with more. It's not that it's not efficient, it's just that I don't like having the ability to craft things before I necessarily have the binding essence to make use of it. So I just tend to avoid it in general and go for building the item forge in the map the normal way. So as you can see here, I just put tier 2 items on all of my item slots here. I only need to fill in 5 with tier 2 or higher, and then I get the extra 200 renowned, extra 600 binding essence, and the equipment mastery, which has taken me very close to my 4th level of renown. I'm only 128 renown from getting there, but it's going to take a long time because I have completed my major ambition now, and the only other way to get those points is through just having items equipped for a I guess 5 turns at a time, and then it will just give me 2 renown. So that's going to take me, I don't know, at least 30 more turns to do this, right? Because I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm getting 5 a turn. 130 divided by 5 is like what, uh 26 turns or something. That's a long time to wait in order to get to this last level where the units that are recruited are going to be a lot better. And when you take that into consideration, I don't know if I love this ambition compared to the others. Now, if we look at this dragon ruler, it might look like he's privateering, but I just put him in the water because I've been finding that the earlier I get in the water, the better, because I get more experience. I can clear more nodes. As you can see here, I've cleared already 11 nodes and I'm only on turn 11. So I've been able to move very quickly across the map very efficiently and been able to find a lot of fights and take a lot of fights using this strategy. I also found that this dragon ruler, with the way I leveled them up, they're very efficient in combat. You might expect this guy to take some damage here, but what's really interesting is with the amount of regeneration that this guy's able to generate off of the improved restoration, the overflowing restoration, my guys barely take any damage and they can just continuously go clear, clear, clear with the build that we have here. And that just took me to the renown level 4. I think I was able to get this to 200 gold income around turn 9. So I was able to start getting this bonus, which helped me with clearing nodes. And then that in turn allowed me to finish my renown track a little bit earlier than when I was in the other save. Now, if we look at this save with the privateer leader that I showed off earlier, we can see that I didn't go for the major ambition here because there were no water infestations near me. But that's okay because there were a lot of naval battles for me to take, and I'm actually able to get this guy to his 4th level of renown on turn 6, as early as turn 6, because I was just able to scout out the area and find a lot of little fights here. If we go here, with this stack and these guys, we'll be able to take that fight pretty soon, pretty easily. And then some of the other ones nearby will be how we follow up here to get our last bit of renown. So here, there's one fight done. Just take that, and if I wanted to be very efficient, I would only send a single unit off like this. He might die, but I wanted to show off quickly. Whoop, never mind. We need this guy to come a little closer like this, and then we'll see that my guy is now up to his 4th level of renown. Pretty good, pretty easy to accomplish for this privateer thing. The only thing about this that you need to keep into consideration is that it might be a little bit harder for you to get the extra thing that you get on the major ambition, and this one's pretty negligible when you compare it to some of the other things you can get from the other ambitions. My next tip is to use the mount traits with the Honor Guard unit to get very mobile charge-like units. This guy is an optional cavalry unit, so he won't always be mounted, but if you take something like the Graceful Judge mounts, then he will become mounted, and that can allow you to move further on the battle map. I believe this one does not. This will just give you the ability to get Touch of Grace, which is not a bad thing to put on this unit because he does go in the front of the battle and he does need to tank a little bit of damage, and being able to just heal a little bit of that passively is quite nice. The defensive strike is like a charge attack because it uses a single action, which means you can go to the end of your movement range and deal a lot of damage. It won't knock the enemy out of defense mode, it will put this unit into defense mode. So it's kind of like a charge attack that is more defensively focused for your armies, but at the same time can let you deal a lot of damage. This does have a cooldown associated with it, unlike a lot of charge attacks, but the neat thing about this is that when it's on cooldown, you do have a repeating attack that you can use to deal a lot of damage to enemies that are standing next to you. One thing I really liked pairing with the mount traits is Bulwark. Bulwark is a 2-point pick, and because Defensive Strike puts you in defense mode, I think you get a lot of utility out of this general interaction. I've been playing around with this unit a lot recently, and one of the more interesting things I noticed is that a double attack is pretty similar to a defensive strike, as you can see, is 2410, or I can do 2611. So if you can get a double attack and use the counter stance spell efficiently, I think it's totally fine to use a double attack instead of the defensive strike, especially if it's flanking, because you won't need the defense when you um, from his retaliation. And like I mentioned earlier, charge units, they cancel retaliation, but this guy won't. So there is that dynamic. If you do want to remove retaliation, you may want some actual charge units in the army. And if you do put them on mounts, one of the things you're going to need to keep in mind is that they're going to be very vulnerable to um, polearm units, and there's always the choice to take athletics. Athletics is a 3-point pick that will give your guys 40 movement. That's pretty similar to what the honor blades here, or not the honor blades, sorry, excuse me, the judge mounts give you. The judge mounts don't give you very fast movement, which lets you move 6 hexes in combat and gives you 48 movement on the world map. And I believe athletics gives you 40 movement on the world map and 40 movement in the battles here. So I did just take a second to make sure that athletics was working the way that I remember it working, and I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that the nice thing about athletics when you compare it to the mount traits is polearms won't get that extra damage boost against your units that are optional cavalry with athletics, but it will also let you keep up all the guys that wouldn't be optional cavalry with your army. So it's generally a very nice pick, but there's also the other things that you can get from mount traits which aren't too bad, like the fact that your guys can become flying. That can allow you to move around the map very efficiently. Pestilent escape isn't bad. But if we look here, a lot of these aren't saying anything about the movement. I think the only one that gives you very fast movement is actually this one. This says that you get very fast movement, which will translate into 6 movement points in combat and 48 movement points in the world map. Now that I think about it, I think getting flying might give you similar tags. It gives you extra vision, and I know it reduces your unit model count, but it's not listed off in the description here. Another thing that's worth mentioning is that you can get extra damage on your flanking attacks, which will allow your defensive strikes to just hit even harder, but you have to get into position to flank. So I might recommend you give your honor blades extra movement if this is a pick that you're considering for this build. My next tip is to either use Swiftfoot Raptor Mounts or flying units to get around the foliage in combat effectively. The changes to foliage in the free Tiger update we're all going to get on November 5th is going to make it so that most units will have a much harder time moving across most battle maps. The foliage here is making it so that this guy can't travel 4 hexes in this direction. He can only get 3 because the slowing effect now will make it so that if you try to go this way, then it's just going to cost you a little bit more movement. The Swift Foot Raptor, he's actually going to not be immune to this, but because he has 48 movement points, he's able to move 6 hexes normally without any thing in the way. I think this guy can go 6 this way. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But just one bit of foliage will take him down to 5 hexes, which is more than what this guy can do normally. So it's still pretty good if you run across one bit of foliage with a raptor mount, but the best thing you can do is just take something that's flying. If you can put your rulers on the wyvern mounts or a flying mount, or if you take the dragon ruler, then you just fly right over the foliage and it doesn't slow you down one bit, which is pretty good, but it will leave you vulnerable to certain things like getting ahead of the rest of your army if the rest of them are not flying. I did mention earlier that I like taking Bulwark with the mounted traits so that my honor blades are able to take advantage of going into defensive mode using the defensive strike, but that may not be the best thing to consider if you're going to be moving your guys into foliage. If you're actually going to be hiding out in foliage, you may want to actually consider stacking quick reflexes to get an extra 25% evasion on your units that already have the obscuring penalty on them, which will make them 40% harder to hit. So that would be a 65% harder to hit. We may be able to get this guy to take a attack against my guys if I put them in foliage up here. So let's see if we can do that really quickly on this side. My guys form up. It's easier to get them to move together like this because they all are fast movement. And let's see if he can take a really low accuracy shot here, if he's going to decide that's worth doing. Now he's not going to do that this turn. Regardless, it's going to be pretty low accuracy if he were to try and shoot somebody in foliage. And I bet if I just pass one more turn, he will try to do that. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you like foliage and you like this interaction, you can actually spawn it in using the ritualist class. This playthrough I went for restore overflow as the path I went down for ritualist, but once we're done with this combat, I'll just hop out quickly to show you how that could look, or how you could build your ritualist hero to interact more with this. Now, as you can see here, we've got a long range penalty, we have quick reflexes, and we have obscured by obstacle, all adding to a very low percent chance to hit here. I think it can't go below 5%. It just stopped at 5% because of the way the accuracy is calculated here. It's got 90% accuracy being reduced by 50 and 90. So it should be theoretically at 0 if all these things could take away from the accuracy, but they wanted to make it so that range shots like this don't have a 0% chance to hit. They at the very least will have a 5% chance to hit. Now, if I wanted to, I could reset my hero here and go for this middle path, which has to do with creating wild growths, or basically foliage will spawn on the map when you use conjure wild growth, and this foliage can either hurt your enemies, which is not bad, or you can make it so that it helps your friends in the foliage. And I think spawning it on your friends so that they are harder to deal with using range attacks is very valuable. So I think most of the time I'm going to go down this path, and then if I wanted to, I may end up also getting the overflowing restoration, because I find that having this amount of healing is very valuable when you're trying to clear the map, and I think having two sources of it could be very nice, especially if you've got another source that makes it so that your units don't take as much damage because they're dodging attacks by being in foliage. My next tip is don't underestimate skirmishers. With this new change to foliage, skirmishers just became a lot better because all skirmishers are going to have the ability to be swift, which means that they don't get slowed in combat, and foliage doesn't make it so that they can't reach as far. If we look here, he can go 5 spaces this way through 2 bits of foliage, or he can go 5 spaces this way through no foliage, which makes them very versatile units. I know a lot of people were using skirmishers before the update, but I suspect people are going to be using them more because of this dynamic. And the fact that they deal good damage is always generally a nice way to open up a fight. If you can get a lot of damage on the enemy before they can deal damage to you, that should make it so that you're more likely to take out their units before they can take out yours, which will make it so that you're much more likely to win the fight. Another interesting thing with the spawn in wild growth mechanic is I can use this more aggressively and just make it so that the AI has less paths to come to me, because my skirmishers can move through it. And then another cool thing you can do once you have access to spells is you can actually animate Flora, which is a skirmisher, which deals with the other foliage very efficiently. Now this guy was a flyer, so he didn't care about the foliage, he just came forward, but that can be good at separating the flying units from the non-flying units, and that way you don't have to fight the whole army at the same time. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I can turn this foliage into a guy. I will have him actually move for a second to show you that he doesn't care about there being foliage around him. He can still move through these as efficiently as if there was no foliage around him. He would normally get, I think, 4 hexes of movement because he has 32, 24 movement points here. Yeah, 24 movement points allows him to go this far and still do some attacks. The fact that skirmishers can get around the slowing effect that is now attached to foliage is going to be better for certain cultures than it is going to be for other ones. For example, the Reavers and the Barbarians both have tier 1 skirmishers that they can get access to at the very beginning of the game, and they're going to be very good at clearing the map as a result of that. The Reavers also have the Dragoon, which is a phenomenal T3 skirmisher because it can apply distracted. One of the things I really like about the Sunderer here is there is no cooldown on their range attack, which means it's easier for them to stay away from the enemy and just deal a little bit of damage and apply some status effects at the same time. While if we compare that to the Reaver one, that one has a cooldown and it can lock the enemy in place. It will immobilize them, giving the overseer a chance to try and take over that unit. As I mentioned a second ago, this guy's also skirmisher, and I really like the harrying shot. This applies distracted, and there is no cooldown on it. It's just a good way to make it so that you can delete an enemy very, very quickly. And then after they attack, they're able to move back. So they're going to be able to like jump into the foliage after taking a shot or run behind some foliage to make it so that melee can't get into range to attack them as easily. But there's always the consideration of tomes. Don't forget, you've got tomes that can give you access to some really good skirmisher units relatively quickly. I did show you the nature one not that long ago. The um, Tome of Roots gives you a entwined thrall. The uh, Shadow one gives you a lesser snow spirit that is also a skirmisher. The Tome of Cryomancy has this skirmisher in here, which is very nice. It has a cooldown on its ranged attack, but it can freeze, which is incredibly good. And then the last little one I wanted to mention was the Slithers. I love the way the Slithers work. They are a nature tome technically, or they're in the nature tomes here. This guy has a venomous spit with no cooldown. It's very strong because not only does it not have a cooldown, it has a pretty good chance that it can apply poison, which will allow its melee strikes or other Slayer's melee strikes to deal a lot of damage against that target. If you can combine that with Mighty Meek and or the Draconic range, these guys are a complete powerhouse, and I think it doesn't mention that you can get Slip Away on that unit here, but if you get that's right, the rapid evolution enchantment, this will make it so that this evolution unit will have a very good staying power on the battlefield. It'll be very efficient. My next tip is to use the blueprint system down here in the bottom right to craft weapons with the abilities from the Pantheon. It used to be that if you took the Crow Master Start to get the Crow Bow, that ability would just stay on your hero after you unequipped the item. Now the ability to summon in a crow is attached to the starting item that you take, and if you unequipped it, you no longer have the summon in crow. Let me just unequip this to show you. Crow Master is gone here, and if I wanted to craft something like it or better, all I need to do is go into blueprints and um, select one of the Pantheon options over here, like Crowbow, and if then from there I can make it better. I can add in some other things to increase its damage output. I think it was 14 repeating, and with this it turns up to 18 repeating at tier 4. So that's cool that you can use the blueprint system in order to interact with those Pantheon abilities and systems. But what I found really interesting here is it's not just the one that you picked at the beginning that you can use to build off of. You can use any Pantheon thing that you've unlocked previously. Some cost more, some cost less. Some of them are two-handed things. And this shield, for example, is goes on the offhand, so it's going to require less essence to make than a two-handed item. One of the cooler things you can do with this new Pantheon blueprint interaction is that you can take the society traits reclaimers and Cult of Personality to get you a extra hero that can equip the things that you craft out of the item forge a little bit earlier. Unfortunately, when I come in here to my heroes, none of them are guys that can use crowbows. And in fact, just got 2 warriors, and both of them are incapable of using the crowbow. But that doesn't mean that I can't come in here and craft them something useful from the blueprints. I just need to try and pick something that somebody with the warrior class could equip. They can't equip bows, but they could use like the umbral sword. So in theory, I could craft this and start using 2 Pantheon items to clear the map on turn 4 or so. Another cool thing that they added to the item forge here is now we have the ability to craft different dragon claw types. It used to be that you only could pick some type of dragon claw that would be offensively focused, dealing 18 damage on average for their lower tier dragon claw, but then you could add effects to it to make it so that it does more than 18 damage, I want to say. Yeah, it goes up to 20 here and then 22 there. But now we also have the ability to take something that will give you a defense mode. The armored claws here will give you the shield defense mode if you say wanted to build your dragon to be a little bit more defensively focused. Or you could take a war claw, which would make it so that your dragons act more like charge units. They can charge into enemies, canceling their defense modes and removing retaliations. My next tip is to try out the new version of the Dragon Lord Ruler type. And while there are some really cool stuff over here in the Dragon Lord perks that you can pick at the beginning of the game or start unlocking towards at the very beginning of the game, what I really, really like about the changes is the changes to signature skills. If we go in here, you get the choice between 6 aspects, 1 for each affinity, and all of these have the ability to give you extra HP, armor, and resistance. One of the tricky things about the dragon rulers is that they don't have any items that can go on their head, on their chest, or on their legs, or they can't take mounts as well, which means compared to the Wizard Kings and the Champions and even the Elder Sovereigns to an extent, they couldn't quite keep up with the stat boost that those other ruler types got from their items until we got these signature skill changes. So this is kind of like you're getting some higher tier items in the spots that can't have items, and then it gives you something extra on top of that. If you want the nature aspect, you're going to be able to heal your guys with non-base attack abilities. If you take the order thing, all adjacent guys will get a little bit of extra resistance, making it harder to deal magic damage to guys standing next to your dragon. And then once you get to level 8, you can choose between, I guess you have to take an aspect before I'll give you the other choices. So let's just take the chaos one. Is pretty good. Getting crit chance is pretty good. And then once we get to our second signature skill, that is when transformations come into play, and this can change your unit type. It can turn you into an infernal fiend, it can turn you into an elemental, which is pretty cool because I think that interacts with things that dragons weren't able to interact with before this update. We also have this really cool fey growth thing, which will make it so that you create obscuring flora in adjacent hexes. This is really, really good if you're going to be going for the ritualist wild growth mechanics, the ability to conjure in wild growth. So you know what? Maybe we'll take that just to pick an option. All of these are really, really interesting and add a lot of different strategies to the game. I am planning on making a deep dive video going over all these options in a little bit more detail, but I haven't quite had enough time to process how all of these options interact with each other and how they can interact with the different class choices you get. Like if you take the nature breath, which I did in this one, I started off with the rituals class, but I could have been a defender class or warrior class, and I think there may be one that actually makes you into a mage class. And I haven't also looked too closely at the stuff over here in the top left. What I found I was picking a lot of the time was the stuff from the ritualist class because I really, really liked the ability to have extra healing on my guys, and I really like the ability to spawn in obscuring stuff. But you know, there's always the ability to tail swipe. We have slightly different versions of tail swipe that you can pick between, as well as slightly different versions of breath weapons you can pick between. And of course, you may want to make it so that your dragon can breathe a lot of fire all the time. So this stuff over here is cool, but I think in general, I may be gravitating more towards the class picks over here, and then just getting these signature skills whenever I can, because they just have passive benefits that are applied when you get to that level. You don't actually have to spend a point on getting the extra HP here or increasing your breath weapons size. But yeah, if we look here, all these are going to increase your HP a little bit as well as do something extra. And then at level 16, you get improved breaths. Actually, no, wait, I just got to pick one of these to show off the last set of choices you get. These are the elder versions of each of the affinities. The things are here are a bit like the aspects we saw earlier. My next tip is to locate and clear out the prestigious statue pickups as early as you possibly can, because you really don't want these pickups to fall into enemy hands. What I found was when I cleared this prestigious statue, I was getting somewhere between 90 and 100 Imperium every time I cleared it out. I couldn't believe my luck in this playthrough because it spawned literally right next to my capital, which is, I would say, a little bit early for me to be picking up this much Imperium. You could, in theory, waste it on expanding your city using the attract population button, but I know people really, really find that button to be inefficient, and it's just there to allow people to push towards their goals a little bit faster at in an inefficient rate if they're really, really trying to grow their cities. Right now, I'm actually not able to even use the Imperium on my Empire development. I'm going to have to wait 2 more turns, so I guess I may as well set up the ability to build a city here in 2 turns while I pass those 2 turns. But it's it's something that regardless of what point of the game you're in, you're going to want that Imperium because it just opens up a lot of possibilities. Sometimes people use the Imperium in order to get their heroes a little bit earlier. I don't think that's worth um, doing in this situation. I'm pretty sure the best thing you could do with this Imperium is to build a second city as quickly as possible. This should allow you to build cities even quicker than the adept settlers, who require less Imperium in order to build. If I was playing as adept settlers, I think I'd be able to start my city this turn, but right now I only have to wait 1 more turn. I could start building it on turn 4, which is, I think, 2 turns earlier than what most factions would be able to do. When it comes to building their second city. And like I mentioned earlier, you can use your Imperium on things here, but unfortunately at this phase of the game we actually haven't built up the affinity points to unlock anything interesting. So it might be something that is worth sitting on at the very, very early stages of the game, but still I would argue you want to go out and get these things as quickly as possible. One of the more interesting things you can do with locations like the prestigious statue here is you can see the outline of it in the fog of war. It's kind of hard to see, but I'm going to scroll around a little bit to try and show that in the middle of this hex you can kind of see a little dragon outline, and that's what the prestigious shrine actually looks like. I'll try and get this guy closer so that you can actually see that now. Right here has the outline of that, and it's kind of hard to see behind the unit, so it's kind of go around behind. You can see it's basically a little, I think, dragon statue here, and it can be something that you can see in the fog of war, but it's quite tricky. You kind of have to scroll around and zoom in and out to see these kinds of things in the fog of war. But still, I find that pretty helpful when you're trying to find those types of locations that are more valuable than others. I've done that before for the Umbral Abyss, just looking for the tentacles off in the distance, or every once in a while I'll see a watchtower and I'll start sending my scout towards it because I know getting that watchtower will be very valuable for the rest of my army. My next tip is to use Empowered Strikes to try and stun lock your opponents. Empowered Strikes is a new enchantment in the new Tier 1 Tome of Discipline, and this says that you basically will get a little bit more damage on your melee strikes, but also every third melee attack in a turn has a 60% chance of inflicting stun, which is really, really good if you can get that to trigger and if you can get 3 attacks in a turn. If you can't, then you're just basically getting a little bit of extra damage, and that's not the main selling point of Empowered Strikes. The best part of Empowered Strikes is that you can make it so that the enemy can't attack you on the next turn, and you can knock them out of defense mode so that you can deal more damage to them with your other units. It's really good across the board. So I would recommend you try and play defensively with Empowered Strike, making it so that the opponent comes to you and that you can then stun them on your next turn. Now let's actually take a second to see how that would look in practice. Right here, I baited these guys forward so that they would be next to a bunch of guys with repeating melee attacks. And right here, it's saying that I might get the stun. If I do, that means that I can focus my efforts on other units. Speed this up, and we got the stun there. Very good. So now this guy, he can try and do the same thing on this unit. And if he does, then we get to ignore him and move on to other units there. This is like a perfect example of generally what you want to see here. Now, if I were to try and go behind this guy, I could try and breath him for poison, or I can try and make it so adjacent unit heals a little bit of HP. I guess this guy could take a little bit of healing. One of the really interesting things about this strategy is I would think that you're going to end up taking a bit of damage on that initial strike. So having a source of regeneration like we do here can be very, very valuable. And there's other things in the Tome of Discipline which will allow you to keep your guys alive longer and from a safer distance. You know what? This guy, he can probably just do 2 attacks against that unit and it's fine. Put this guy in defense mode and have this guy use his turn because why not, right? You can't get him over to there very easily, so we'll do it from here. And as you can see now, we only have to really worry about one opponent. I really do like this. Puts them in defense mode after they've attacked because that'll keep them safer. There's a lot of things in the Oathsworn faction too that is about survivability, so you can use that in synergy with the new Tome of Discipline. There is one more thing that's worth mentioning from the Tome of Discipline in relation to this strategy, the stunning using empowered strikes, is something that can be easier to trigger if you have the monk unit. This guy can leap forward only 2 hexes forward, and then if he's able to get next to an opponent, he can do his triple attack that results in a AoE, and it could attempt to stun on its third attack too. I think at one point the AoE used to stun or have a 60% chance to stun everybody in that AoE, but I believe they found that was too strong and nerfed it so that the monk's third attack stun only targets this single target that was hit by the first melee strike. Now, there are other things in the game that can stun units, like the Anvil Guard, Spell Shield, and Warrior, which would all be other great sources of stun and very, very valuable in manual combat. But I know in the past auto combat has had a little bit of trouble keeping track of the statuses that have already taken away actions. For example, if you freeze somebody with a lesser ice elemental, then the AI would also end up stunning them, which is a complete waste. So keep that in mind when you're building your factions that are focused on stunning the enemy. That's everything I had for you in this one. I'll see you around. Have a good one.